So here's something we all think about, even if we're sort of borderline people of faith, or we're not really sure what we believe, or we come into church every now and again. What do we do? Like, what are we responsible for? And what is God responsible for? Because the Bible teaches both. The Bible teaches, be still and know that I'm God. In other words, God, you're in control. Like, I don't need to worry about anything. You're in control. But the Bible also teaches, be doers of the word. And that's what we talked about last week, when Jesus said, put into practice the words I teach you, because if you don't put them into practice, they're not worth much. So what is it that we do, and what is it that God is responsible for doing? I think a lot of us wonder that sometimes. Like, take prayer, for instance. You could pray 24/7. You could be really a disciplined prayer. You could be a prayer warrior. And that's an amazing thing, but at some point, you have to get up off your knees and get stuff done, right? But on the other hand, some of the things that you pray about, you can't do anything about. And every one of us has been there before. When you're just praying and it's like, God, I have no control over this situation, and I just need you. I need you to help me in this. What is God responsible for? What are we responsible for? It feels good to get things done, doesn't it? Like, let's get her done. Let's make this happen. And for Paul and for Jesus, and those words we read, there's certain things that only God can do. So how do we figure that out? How do we find that balance between what we're supposed to do and what we believe God can do in our lives? Because that's an important issue. Most of us want to get things done now. That's human nature for us. Let's just do it now. I don't have the patience to wait. A couple of women were out power walking yesterday morning when I pulled into the church for rehearsal. Man, they were just getting her done down at Maple Street. It was just an image for me. It's like, you're just out there, just get her done. That's what we want. A young woman is moving apartments, so she puts the word out. She needs some help. And the next morning, 3 burly, strapping men are there with coffee and with Timbits and big grins on their faces. Where's the fridge? Where's the piano? Let's get her done. That's what we want. We just want to do stuff. The Maple Leafs start training camp next month. Tavares, Matthews, Marner, flying over the boards for another season. Let's get her done, boys. That's what we want. But sometimes God says, wait, hold on. This is up to me. This is going to be up to me now, God says. Feels good, though, to get things done. And on top of that, it's biblical. Sure it is. Be doers of the word, not just hearers. Put things into action. What good is faith without any good deeds? The thing is, there are some things in life that we just can't get done. So how do we balance those out? What are they and how do we know? Some things just can't get done by our power. Last March, I remember sitting in our house looking outside, and it was like this blizzard, and I thought, man, I would just give anything for summer to be here. Beyond my control. Spring comes when spring comes. You can't control when the spring comes into your life. Someone says, my wife has been sick. I'm worried. She's worried. It's been a hard time. I want her healed now. I want her better now. I want this fixed now. But sometimes you can't do anything but pray the prayer that says, God, this is just you now. Like, this is just beyond what I'm capable of doing. And then God says, I'll be there. It is a tenet of our faith when God says, I will be there. And it is a promise that will never be broken. But how do we balance that, though? How do we prevent from ending up laying on a couch with a remote watching Netflix expecting God to do everything in our lives? There's got to be some kind of a balance where we know what to do and then we give it to God. So Jesus told a story about this. Simple story. I love simple stories. I love stories that I can just hear them, read them in the Bible, and it's like, yeah, I get that. Because so often Jesus told parables, and after he told the parable, then he'd have to explain it because the disciples had no idea what it meant. But this is a simple one. And on this day, Jesus is talking about gardening. It's true, he was a carpenter by trade, but he knew a little bit about gardening. Well, because he was Jesus, but also because it was an agricultural society. So he told this parable about gardening as a way of helping his listeners understand a deep truth. He said this: "This is what the kingdom of God is like. Man scatters seed on the ground day and night. Whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, although he does not know how. All by itself, the soil produces." This is the get her done part where this guy is out. He's actually planting the seeds. He's being proactive. He's doing something, but then at some point, he's got to just stand back. It's kind of like, this is where God does the God thing. We have a modest garden here at the church. Our little Garden of Eden. Kenny's Garden is what we call it in memory of Kenneth McAlpine. And some of our folks have been working away on it, and Mac gave me a tour not too long ago. Janet has given me a tour before. And it's pretty amazing when people who know how to garden, I say, I don't know anything about gardening, but they just said, you know what, if you just do your thing, then the sun and the rain and Mother Nature will do the rest. And I'd say, I don't know anything about, I was raised in the city, raised in the suburbs. I don't know what it's like to have dirt and soil on my hands. And they say it's never too late to learn how to plant a seed. And they go through the particular things you have to do. Make sure the topsoil is good. Dig it up so there's oxygen in it. Make sure there's enough space between the plants. And I'm learning a lot because I don't know how to, I've never done this. Good irrigation and all of that. And I remember when Janet once said to me a couple years ago, she said, even within all that, it's just an absolute miracle to me. Every spring, it grows. It just grows. Like a seed goes into the ground, the seed dies, it's just a little seed and it just erupts, and it's just this incredible mystery of how God resurrects every spring. We plant, but there's something else that grows it. And the point Jesus is making when he said the seed would sprout and grow, but he does not know how, the planter doesn't know how, is that there's something similar going at work in our lives and in the world that God does. We're just responsible for seed planting. We're responsible for particular kinds of seed. If we do, here's the promise. If we do that, God promises that he'll be the power that will grow it. And I'll tell you, the burden lifts when we believe that. Because we all plant seeds in different ways, and we worry about whether those seeds are going to grow. Raising kids is planting seeds. We give them everything we are, our values, our money, our direction, our love. We just give, and at some point they leave. Some point they come back, but generally speaking, they leave, and we just trust. We just hope, we just pray that they're going to grow into beautiful things. But that's in God's hands. All we do is plant the seed. The relationship we have with people we work with. Be kind. Be generous to that person you don't like at work. And it may not pay off right away. Being gentle, being kind, being generous. But it's seed planting. And you don't know what it'll grow into. At some point, you just do what you need to do in terms of the fruits of the Spirit and trying to share those. And then at some point, it's just God that is going to be at work. And if we can believe that, it lifts the burden off what we're doing in our lives. As a church minister, there are seeds that I plant here. I encourage people to be a part of worship. I encourage people to look at the gifts that they have and find new ways to share them. I encourage people to go to the library and read Christian books. I encourage people to try their best to walk in the footsteps of Jesus. And sometimes I think, I have no idea what this is going to lead to. But it lifts a burden for me. Because at some point, it's in God's hands. How the Spirit works in people's hearts is quite beyond me. Now, here's the other truth that comes through this parable. Growth takes time. And man, this trips us up so many times in our lives. There's a process for growth. And Jesus is just saying something that every farmer, every gardener knows, self-evident stuff. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head, and then finally the harvest. It's so important to remember. The time it takes for God's growth is so often what trips us up, because so often in our lives we're just stuck on the stalk part, and we can't understand why the kernel doesn't grow or the head, much less the harvest. The harvest is like way over here, and we're just kind of stuck, and we get so discouraged. And Jesus is like, please remember, growth takes time. It's just a simple lesson in patience. We talk about miracles. I want a miracle in my life. You want a miracle in your life. The problem is, the way we define miracles is that one minute she's sick, the next minute she's well. Like, that's the way we define miracles, as being instantaneous. And that's a problematic description of what a miracle is. Because for Jesus, miracles don't happen instantaneously. It's a growth. And Jesus is just saying, if you just plant the seed, like, how long does it take a seed to grow? For heaven's sake, Jesus is saying. It doesn't happen overnight. All I want you to do is plant seeds in your life. Plant the good seeds in your life, and then you leave it to me, and that lifts the burden off of your shoulders. Some of us today are struggling. It could be a broken relationship. It could be depression. It could be loneliness. It could be worry about the future. You know the weights that we all carry. Of course you do. It's human. It's just human to carry weights like that. And it's like we just sometimes feel like we're just stuck in a certain stage of growth. And the problem with that, the danger with that is that we just give up on the faith that God will grow. But don't give up on the faith. Because Jesus said God's time is not our time. Jesus encourages you to believe that there is a process. And so pray in your heart, God, I trust in your ways. I believe in your promises. I will have the faith that the good seed that is in me will grow, even though right now I'm walking through the valley of a shadow. Here's the last thing. You may not be able to get your heads around this, because I'm still trying to get my head around it, and I've been thinking and praying about this for a long, long time. We are created free beings. And what that means is that we have a choice to not plant a good seed. Jesus said, I want you to plant these seeds in your life, and we have a choice not to. And even if we do, the people that we plant those seeds in have a choice around how they live their lives. Because that's how God created us. We're created free to choke the seed. But I'll tell you this. There are stories of people like that in the Bible. People who refused to plant the seed that God was handing out to them. Or if they did get the seed, they would choke it in their fingers. There are stories in the Bible of people who did that. And it turns out many of the main players in the Bible are people who tried to choke the seed. And what happens is, miraculously, God grows them anyway. I can't get my head around this still, even today. Jacob spent his young life running away from God, making mistakes, lying to people. He ends up in the wilderness with nothing and no one to talk to. And then God shows up. A stairway to heaven comes down to Jacob. And Jacob still wrestles with God all night long. And in the end, God wins. And Jacob has a seed in his heart. Jacob never asked for it. Same with Moses. Moses never asked for God to send him a burning bush. He fled Egypt. He went to Midian. He was a shepherd for 3 decades. And then God shows up and says, I want you to go back. And Moses kept saying no. And God said, what I'm telling you to do, you have no choice about that. And the story ended there. After Israel was freed, Moses had that seed in his heart that he never even asked for. I'm still trying to get my head around that. I don't really understand it. Jesus' disciples never chose Jesus. He chose them. Matthew was a tax collector. All of the people around Matthew hated him. He was a cheat. He cheated his own people. God took a seed and put it in his heart, and then he became an apostle, and you can read his words in your Bible today. I don't really understand. Paul, who wrote the words that we shared about Apollos and Paul, Paul ran. Paul persecuted Jesus' followers. Paul clearly took the seed and choked it year after year after year, and then finally God came to him and said, enough, I'm going to put the seed in your heart. And Paul didn't even have a choice, I don't think. And then he became an apostle, and he wrote half the New Testament. I don't really understand how this works, but this is what I'll say for you today and for me today. In the meantime, because you have a freedom to not take that seed, but in the meantime, you also have the freedom to take it. You know, you don't have to wait for God to come to you, even though you might be refusing. You can just today. You can do this today, is you can take that seed and you could nurture it and put it into your heart. If you want to know the ways of God, if you want to experience this growth that Jesus keeps talking about in your life, you can take that seed and you can plant it. It's never too late to learn how to plant a seed, is what Janet told me when we stood out in that garden 3 or 4 years ago. It's never too late. Pray this: God, I'll trust in your ways, and I will take that seed and I will plant it in my heart, and I will do what I can to nurture it. And be assured, Jesus says, that seed will grow. And of that, there can be no mystery. It's good to be together here today on this beautiful Canada Day at the beginning of summer. Thanks be to God.